So today I have Joe Amato from Vivo Creative. He's the owner and creative director. Joe, it's great to see you.
You too, man.
I'm Jake Garay from the Garay-Mashaw team with Berkshire Hathaway, and you're listening to my podcast, Selling the Suburbs. I'm sitting down with real estate agents, investors, experts, and various professionals throughout the industry. On Selling the Suburbs, we're discussing the truth about real estate, entrepreneurship, and the ever-changing housing market. Before we get started, I kind of want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself for everybody who does not know you. Kind of, what's your story? I know you're in marketing, right? You've got this long-standing history of that. You've got your own company now. How did you get into marketing? Where'd you start, and why marketing, I guess?
I kind of fell into marketing and advertising. I think a lot of people in that field kind of just fall into it. That's not something that they like actively go look for, but I fell into advertising sales, believe it or not, for a radio station, which is how I met you. Yep. Long time ago. Selling ads, fell in love with the creative side of it, because that's what is ultimately what made the advertising work, like actually writing good ads and writing good copy and writing things that stuck. And I developed such good relationships with clients that I just learned more and more about marketing and advertising and started to kind of educate and coach clients on what to do. And then social media started to become this big thing. The internet started to kind of take over the traditional media. And I saw where that was going, hated who I was working for, and just hated being in corporate. Left a 6-figure sales job to start a business from nothing right before we found out that we were having our first kid. So it was like, this is either going to work. Timing. Yeah, it's either going to work or it's going to work. Like, those are my two options. So started that in the summer of 2015. And here we are 8 years later.
Seems to be working.
It seems to be, must be doing something right. Like, that's the way I look at it. But that's now, awesome. You know, I started off doing everything. Like we were talking a little bit off air, like jack of all trades, taking every project that came my way, whether it was a freaking postcard or a website or writing radio copy, whatever it was, and then kind of specialized, for lack of a better term, in the social and digital marketing side of things, where video started to become more important. And now we almost focus exclusively on video content for social, both organic and paid. So like this
You've got a good niche down.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to figure out, like, you know, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? What are people gravitating towards? Where are the eyeballs? And that's kind of where we go. And over the last 3 or 4 years or so, in this business, you have to get good at following the eyes and ears. Mm-hmm. If you are stuck on the way that things used to be and the way that you started off, you're probably going to fall because you're just not following where the attention's going. And that's what we've done since I started this.
That's awesome. So what was it that made you get away from kind of like, what I would say is the traditional type of media company, right? What was it that you disliked there? What did you feel like you could do something better, or you had something different to offer?
I was having a tough time in traditional media. Number one, because as a salesperson, you have a number on your head, right? Like, you have to sell this product, you have to get to this number, almost like whether or not the client actually needs it. I only focused on what the client needed, which was what made me a really great salesperson, right? But the company had objectives and they had targets and things you had to sell, and whether it fit or not, you had to try to get to that number, which I did not like that aspect of it. The other, that's more on the company side. On the advertising side itself, really hard to track how the traditional media is actually impacting my client's business. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to show them, you can't click on a radio ad. You can't buy from a TV ad. In some ways you can, but for the most part, it's really hard to prove that. So for me, it was hard for me to sleep at night knowing that I'm selling this thing that I don't really know that it's working. I mean, like, deep down, I knew I was doing something good because I was creating a really good level of awareness for my clients, because they were getting feedback, but you really don't know. And that, plus the fact that it was starting to be pretty overpriced for what, there's less people listening, less people watching, and the costs are going up. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So I had to do something just for my sanity and really focusing on the thing that I enjoyed doing the most out of it.
So first question right off the gate that I had kind of wanted to ask you was, and you mentioned it already, attention, right? Where do you see the attention today? If someone says, Joe, where are the most eyeballs, or maybe the question is, where are the best investment of time, energy, and money for the best return on investment for the attention you're getting? Where are you focusing right now?
We focus all of our attention on mobile. Like that's first and foremost that's where everybody's eyeballs are 5, 6, 7 hours a day, right? I get scared when my phone tells me how much time I've spent on my phone every single day. And I'm like, there's no way I've spent that much time looking at my screen.
Calculating how many years of your life are going away.
Yeah. And that's, it's my job to do that to an extent, but that's just how everybody is. Right. So, most of our attention is geared towards that. Within that, there are places where people are spending most of their time, and where we focus are those video platforms that have completely dominated TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube, and to a newer extent, Facebook again. But anywhere that people are consuming videos, that's where we go. And that's what people are doing on their phones. People rarely share photos anymore with anybody. Anytime somebody texts me a piece of media off the internet, it's a video. It's usually a TikTok or an Instagram Reel or a YouTube video. It's just, that's where it is. So that's where we spend most of our time and attention.
It's funny because if you listen to a lot of podcasts now, certain podcasts will have someone who kind of like looks up content that they're trying to talk about and discuss, right? And nowadays, everybody just goes to Twitter, or X as it's now called, to search for that searchable video or that clip that everybody's talking about, because you can go on Google, you can't find it. You can go on YouTube and it's a little bit hard. It's like everybody just searches for it because it's trending on a platform and then you can find it. And it's just amazing to see the way that shareable content has changed just in the last couple of years. And so you kind of alluded to it with your traditional media versus kind of, I'd call it like new brand media, new age media, in the sense that traditional is much more slower to adapt, right? Like the radio, it's a different type of product. How much of the business is adaptability? How fast, for someone who doesn't really know marketing and isn't on the agency side of things, how often are these trends changing? How much of it is just noise, and how much of it is actual like tactical business application where the business owner needs to be aware that things are shifting?
I think you always have to be aware that things are shifting. I mean, look what happened in the last 3 years ago when COVID hit. TikTok came out and completely obliterated social media, like completely just blew it up. Let's start from scratch. Organic reach, short form video, vertical video. Up until that point, I was saying if you're going to post a video, it's got to be a wide video, maybe even a square video. And now, like today, I'm like, don't send me anything that is widescreen. We will not be able to use it unless you're wide enough. Like it's just, you have to be able to change very, very quickly. Even platform to platform, there are things that you have to adapt to. When the CEO of Instagram comes out one day randomly and says, hey, we're not a photo sharing app anymore, you got to adapt. If your job is a photographer and you're posting photos on Instagram and the CEO comes and says, hey, we're not really a photo sharing app anymore, we're more entertainment and video focused, you've got to make that adjustment and say, crap, now I've got to figure out how to adapt to this new way of thinking. And every platform goes through that.
Right.
Everybody's got to be constantly aware of what's going on, unless you're working with somebody like us where that's our job, right?
Right. So you're constantly monitoring those trends, seeing what's working. And as you alluded to with, you've got your key performance indicators, you've got those metrics that you can track. What is it that when you look at a piece of content, right? How do you decide if it's successful or not? Or what are you looking at as saying, you know what, that one really was a successful campaign, or that was a really successful piece of content that we put it out. And this one over here, it wasn't as successful. What are the metrics that you're looking at that you can kind of say that worked or it didn't?
Sure. I have to say that everybody loves the vanity metrics, right? They love the views, likes, comments, saves, all that kind of stuff. And that's great because those numbers are important to an extent because they drive more attention. Without those numbers, you really don't know what's working or not, right? Really what we try to do is we try to look at the business as a whole, right? And we try to look at it and say, okay, when you're working with organic content, it's very hard to target. It's very hard to necessarily track where that traffic is coming from. That's why having a really optimized bio is important, having the right links there, and really paying attention to when traffic is coming in. If we put out a video that ends up going viral for a client and we see their traffic spike, well, there's a reason for that. We see a correlation there. Or if the phone is ringing more after this particular post goes out, we know that there's some kind of a correlation there. But what we really like to do is take high performing pieces of content and use those pieces of content as targeted ads.
So you basically like test them organically, and the ones that you see are doing well, you'll then spend advertising dollars on for more attention.
So long as the client has the budget for it, right? So a lot of our clients are doing a really good combination of both organic and paid. The organic is kind of like driving the bus, and the paid is there to amplify locally if they're local messages that are really cutting through and doing well organically. So that's a big piece of advice is you don't have to get super creative with your ads. Just look at what's performing well organically and use that, target it properly, put a great call to action, and that ad will outperform anything that most likely you can come up with as a quote unquote ad.
So when you look at the actual ad spend, and we'll get kind of a little technical here, what do you think, when you look at planning and saying we want to run an ad with this piece of content that it was successful, what type of budget do you need to work with to even make it worthwhile? Because you hear some people say, oh, you can run ads $5 a day, $10 a day. Is it, what is that number that you really need to make the investment on? Otherwise, you're not really getting a true gauge of if it's effective.
Yeah, I think those $5 a day people are just kind of hoping that they, those are the slot machine players, right? They're going and they're hoping that they hit big on a couple of pennies. You really have to give it its due. It's hard to put a number on it though, because we have had, $1,000 campaign absolutely crush, and we've had, $10,000 campaigns that don't, right? So it's hard. The number doesn't necessarily matter as much as the audience and the creative, right? If you have a good enough audience and you have a good piece of creative and you have enough budget to reach that audience effectively, it's going to work. Whether it's $500 or $5,000, you're going to reach a segment of that audience. And if that ad does a really good job of converting them, it's going to convert no matter what you're spending.
So when you look at a couple of, you work with different industries, right? So there's obviously all different types of businesses. You've got the kind of discretionary type of business, and that's like, okay, you're a pizza shop and you want to run an ad. Like you can easily get someone to go out and buy a slice of pizza or stop in. That's kind of like an easier way to quantify that versus like, I know you work with attorneys, right? And obviously that's kind of like you need it when you need it type of business. And it's not something that you just buy on a whim or go hire on a whim. How do you manage the creative process when you have kind of like that, oh yeah, let me just stop by the local shop and buy this, versus like the professional who has to be an advisor or a trusted person to actually earn that business?
The short answer is I don't work with the pizza shop. Like that's the short answer, because it's much harder, because yes, people are more likely to buy a slice of pizza than they are to hire a lawyer, right? Today, right? I'm way more likely to buy a burger or a cup of coffee than I am to hire a divorce lawyer, for example, right? The difference is that I need to sell 10,000 slices of pizza versus 2 clients for a lawyer. That's the difference, right? So that doesn't mean that the pizza shop should not be marketing the way that we market. It's just that they might not be able to work with a company like ours to be able to accomplish that, right? We have success with high ticket businesses. Mm-hmm. So if a client comes in and a lawyer has an average ticket price of $10,000 for a case, it's going to be a lot easier to show a return on investment rather than a pizza shop that's got to sell 10,000 large pies in a month just to justify their spend. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's obviously a business that's extremely localized versus like an online retailer or something where you can market to the entire country versus, a 15-mile radius around where your store is. Yeah,
and of course, like I'm not even taking e-commerce into consideration here. I mean, we deal a lot with a lot of like local brick and mortar businesses, and a lot of them are service based. But e-commerce is another one where there's still that number that you have to hit, especially if it's a new product that nobody's ever heard of. There's a lot more work that has to get done to get people to even know who you are and care about you before you can even think about them opening their wallet for you.
And then on top of that, a lot of the time those businesses have very, very tight margins, which you need to make sure that you can, like you said, justify that return.
Sure.
So when you look at your creative process, right? Like, take us kind of through, you look at a new business, you take on a new client. How do you go through the creative process of finding out what that business's goals are, what they're trying to achieve, and then kind of building them like a plan of like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it?
Yep, for sure. So We're talking about organic. That's where we're spending most of our time. So a company comes to us and they say, hey, listen, we have very little social presence. We're not getting any traction. We're not getting any traffic from social. We can't seem to grow. We can't get engagement. What do we do? What we try to do is focus on them being able to accomplish one or all three of these things. You either educate, entertain, or inspire. That's it. If your content falls into one of those three or can hit on multiple in a piece of content, it's going to do okay, as long as you are compelling enough and it's generally interesting to the public. So that's where our strategy starts. It's like, what can we either teach people about, what can we entertain them with, or what can we inspire them to do based on what you do? What we don't do is say, tell me the benefits of your product and why somebody should buy from you versus the competition. It's a good way to start in advertising, but in content for social, nobody gives a crap. All they care about is what's in it for them when they open their phone and start swiping through videos. You got to get them to stop. And the way you're going to get them to stop is either to teach them something that they didn't know before, make them laugh, make them cry, entertain them, or inspire them. So that's where our strategy starts. And then we kind of fit those pieces into what that client does. So if the client is a regional pest control company, like we're actually working with, how the hell do you market that on social media? We have a video on fruit flies that people didn't know about that's going viral over the last few days. And it's a short little entertaining educational piece that is shareable. If they came out and said, we offer this prevention method for horse flies, and then, or for fruit flies, we have a horsefly video too. But if they come out and say, this is how you prevent fruit flies from coming in with our patented product, who the hell's going to share that on social media? Nobody's going to do that. But if 500,000 people see your video over a couple days and a small percentage of them are, local and need you and visit your website and they become a lead and you have a good lead flow process after that, then great. That's a success.
So I have two questions that your response just triggered in my head. Number one, you mentioned something about it has to be compelling, right? How much of the business, and this is like how difficult is your job and how much is controllable, how much of it is the individual, right? You go and you film that person or that business, that entity. How much of it is just they've got it or they don't, or how could they become better at it? Now, as someone who is out there creating content all the time, I definitely know that you get better the more you do it, right? So there's no doubt about that. Yeah. But how much of it is the personality or the person that's kind of in the front of the camera?
Out of the gate, having that personality is gonna help you. Like, let's be honest. Like, if you're a dud, you're probably not gonna do too well right out the gate, right? But there's things that you can be coached on, and there's things that you can learn. And like you said, the more you do it, the more you're on camera, the more you're creating content, just the better you get at it. I mean, I sometimes will look at videos of clients that I started, filming 7 years ago compared to what they do now, and it is night and day how much better they've gotten and just how clearer they are and how more concise and entertaining and engaging they are just by learning and doing it over and over again. But, if you've been posting videos for a year and your content is boring, you might want to rethink the strategy, right? Like it could be you. It might not be the content itself, especially if you're getting ideas from other people that are doing similar things and yours is just not hitting. Well, then it might just be the way that you're delivering it. It could actually be you.
And I think, at least from what I've seen, and I with myself in the creative process or with other people that I've seen online and observed, I think a lot of it is people are afraid to just be themselves, right? Like you see a video and you're like, I want to do something like that. And it's like, you're going to try to do what they do. And you're just like the second, third, or fourth best version of that, right? Yeah. And you're not like the best version of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And I think a lot of people, that's kind of like what holds them back is they're like, it's kind of like an amplification of who they are. And if they're afraid that if they're themselves and it's rejected by the quote unquote market, well, then that just means people don't like them, but it's not necessarily the case, right?
Yeah. I think, if you're the fifth person to do something, if you're like the fifth iteration of whatever this thing is, unless it's a trend, right? You have to figure out how to be different, right? Either different or better, right? It's hard to, we always say some of the best ideas come from R&D, like rip off and duplicate, right? Like that's like
the best artists steal.
That's they all do. Like let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
But it's how you duplicate it. It's how you rip off and duplicate that makes a difference. If you're just doing what everybody else is doing and you're just regurgitating it, of course it's not going to do well. But if you could put your own spin on it, one of my favorites recently has been the McDonald's the Grimace Shake, that trend. Have you seen that trend? Right. I've seen a million of them and I've watched almost every single one of them because they're all different, right? Everybody had their own spin on it. So that's an example of taking an idea and completely making it your own off of something that just about everybody has done. So it can be good or bad. I mean, like you really have to put your own spin on it as best you can and make it different or make it better.
Now, the other thing that came to mind was you said, talking about the conversation, framing it around organic type of content, right? Business comes to you, says, Joe, we want to start doing some work with you. How much of the formula is organic versus paid?
So, that really depends on
in
the
an
client.
Ideal world, right? So, is it something where do you need to do the paid advertising in the beginning, or is it something that you're working towards and building? And I understand it's obviously very nuanced based on a specific client. Yeah. But do you think is paid an absolute must, or is it something that's just a piece of the puzzle down the road?
Again, like it obviously depends, but what we're seeing right now is the advertising budgets are getting carved up and they're going into content, right? So if you take that budget and you say, if I have $10,000 and that used to be almost all paid media, and now you're like, well, I need to make content now with that same budget. Well, now the paid media might only be $2,000 of that, right? And the rest of it's going to organic. The positive side of investing more in the organic is that you get more content out of it. The problem with, I think, the traditional idea of making an ad, running it for 3 months, and then seeing if it works is that you have to run it for 3 months and see if it works. If you run 15 pieces of content, you're going to know very quickly if any of them are working, if any of them take off, and that budget's going to be much better spent. Not to mention, if you're running good organic, using those great performing organic posts as ads are going to reduce your advertising costs because it's going to reach more people. The platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are going to show it to more people for less money because it's engaging, because we know it works, and your traffic's going to end up being cheaper, and your budget's working better for you.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's take what's already working. You already know it's effective, and just amplify that. Why waste money? And then, like you said, it is kind of asinine thinking, but it's like, oh, we just burnt 10 grand, and oh look, it got us nothing.
Yeah, let's spend $10,000-$20,000 on this video, and then we're gonna run it for 90 days, and we'll circle back and see how that did. Like, just saying that out loud sounds insane to me.
And for a lot of businesses, they're like, we just spent what we're willing to spend for 6 months in 3 months, and we got nothing for it, and now we're out of the game, right?
And you're stuck with this crappy video that did nothing for you. Whereas, like, my goal in my business, a little like more self-serving conversation here, is that my goal is to give somebody as much content as possible. Because the way I look at it, every single post you put out there is a free lottery ticket. Why wouldn't you put out as many as possible? My job is to get as much of that for you, as many of those tickets as possible for as little as possible, to make sure that I am incredibly valuable to you. And that's what we've been able to do. I mean, every time we shoot with somebody, our goal is a month's worth of content. That's our goal. If we can't get it, we can't get it. That's on the client. Most of the time, if we can't get it, it's on the client. But like, for the most part, we're there to get a month's worth of content, posting for you every couple of days, sometimes, once a day, and then rinse and repeat.
So talking about the content creation process, right? How much is it, because I think there's a lot of words in, you've got advertising, you've got marketing, you've got organic reach, you've got all these different terms, right? Then you've got branding. Like, how much of the company's brand is a part of the conversation when you look at creative content, right? So if you've got an attorney, their brand of, business may be very different than somebody else, right? You said you have a pest control business.
Right.
So, it's like naturally in my head, I think, okay, the attorney may have more like serious branded content or something like that versus a pest control company. You can do a lot more fun content and comedy and things like that. So how much of that goes into that process?
So just like a little marketing 101 here. What I define branding as is it's the association of two things. When I think of this, I think of this, right? When I think of burgers, I think of McDonald's, right? Or I think of Wendy's or whatever. When I think of soda, I think of Coke. When I think of divorce lawyers, I think of my client, right? So that's what branding is. And long term, the more content that you can put out there will help you do that, right? You used to have to do branding with paid media. And a lot of branding messages don't have a call to action. They're not saying buy my thing. It's just saying this is what we do. Yeah, creating awareness. This is what we do when you need us. This is who we are. It's the know me before you need me kind of a mentality. I think I think content is the way to brand now, right? More people 100%. If you're not putting out content as a business, as a creator, as an entrepreneur, as a product even, it's going to be very hard for you to cut through and to brand. It's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time to do that. Whereas, with your phone, you can create 10 pieces of content in your car and be the real estate guy.
Right.
When I think of selling my house, I think of Jake Garay. Like that's your goal.
Right. That's the goal.
It's going to be way more expensive to do that with paid media. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least when you do it organically, it costs you the time. It might cost you some money to do production, but you have that. That's a tangible thing that you have forever that you can repurpose on multiple platforms, use as ads, use as emails, use as long form, use as short form, use as audio. It's way more valuable in the long term to do organic.
It makes a lot of sense. And it kind of like when you think about this form of advertising and marketing, content marketing, it's like, it kind of makes you think like, why was it ever done differently? Right?
Money.
It's true.
Right, that's basically it.
It's so true. It's amazing to see the shift. And that's the power, I guess, of social media, because it gave everybody, an iPhone gives everybody like a production crew at their fingertips. And yeah, it may not be curated and, professionally done like you're seeing now. And, but at least it's something, and it can be done for pennies on the dollar.
It can be done for free if you do it on your own, right? Like it's just the way it is. I think, that's one of the problems with social media is that it gives everybody a platform.
A lot more noise.
Right? There's a lot more noise, a lot more people that you have to cut through, a lot more crap that you have to sift through. But the ones that understand it and the ones that do it well, you see there's a lot of success to be had by doing it that way.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when you look at kind of like your creative process, right? Like take us through, how do you think, are you going to your client saying, I think these are great ideas for your business? Are you relying on them to come to you and then you kind of, give them feedback? How does that creative process look for you?
Again,
because I know you get
depends.
like, we say like you get like marketing brain, like social media brain, right? Like you start thinking like, oh, this is a great thing. This is a great idea. This is a great idea. And it's like you're driving in your car and all of a sudden you have an idea of something a video to shoot or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's a little bit of both, right? So sometimes we'll come up with the idea. I mean, like, we, not so long ago we had this idea for an amusement park where it's like, oh man, like they have a bunch of rides, but I want to run an ad campaign that is all, first person point of view of these rides and showing people what it's like to actually be there. That's right. Cool. So that was an idea. I called them. I was like, listen, hey, I got this idea for you. It's something different. We're going to strap GoPros to people and we're going to have them ride all of your rides. And those are going to be your ads for the summer. They're like, great, let's do it. Right. So that's one of those examples where we had this idea, call the client up and be like, hey, I got an idea for you. A lot of times, most of our clients, we're shooting with them every month, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month, depending on the client. We always have to have fresh ideas. So we're always looking at what are people searching for on Google. We use some services that help us find questions that we can ask that can spark content. The comment sections are always loaded with content ideas. A lot of the inspiration, it's hard to have a lot of the inspiration just come from you because it's exhausting to have to come up with 15, 20 pieces of content for a 2-hour shoot. It's really difficult. So we do lead on the client a little bit for that, but we do have methods that we keep organized as far as like what content we can shoot. If there's something that maybe we can stitch on Instagram or TikTok, we save that video, throw it in a client folder and be like, hey, this is something we need to do, the next time we get together with them. Other times the client will, DM us something and be like, all right, no problem. We'll add it to the list and we'll get to it. We'll figure it out. A lot of what we do when we're filming with a client, right? So let's say we're filming with a lawyer, we'll have our pretty much our plan of what we want to accomplish that day. We spend most of our time coming up with the idea for the hook. That's where we spend most of the time in our creative process when we're shooting with a client. How are you going to start that video? It's the most important part of the video is how you start it. I don't care what you say after that, but how are you going to tell them what you're going to tell them in a way that's going to make them stop scrolling? That's where we spend most of our time in trying to be as creative as possible. That can get exhausting too when you got to come up with 20 of them on the spot, but that's just what we do.
No, it's definitely an interesting process. And I'm always curious to hear, everybody has a different methodology, right? So sometimes, my team and I will just be having a meeting. We're just all throwing out different ideas and you get that one idea and then you're kind of just, everybody's adding like their little bit of spin on it. Or you're like you said, you share social media videos and you're like, okay, I like this, but I think we could change it this way and make it a little bit better. It's interesting to see. And you're right. It does get exhausting constantly trying to think up new ideas, but that's part of the business, right? That's where the attention lies. And if you don't have attention, any business, if you don't have attention, nobody's buying your products, right? Nobody's buying your services. So you're no longer a business. So
the famous last words of any failed business are, if people only knew, right? Like,
it's true. You could have the best products or service in the world. If nobody knows about it, it's useless.
It doesn't matter. There's a lot of great products out there that nobody's ever heard of. And, it's sad, but it's what it is.
So you kind of found this really clearly defined niche in terms of the platforms that you're working on. You said short-term video content and kind of focusing on that. What are the industries that you're really seeing a lot of success in? And kind of, I know you mentioned earlier, kind of focusing on like attorneys and things like that. So what are the industries that you're really honing in on and you see are very effective?
Yeah, I mean, again, anything that has a high ticket price for us is great. So attorneys, vehicles.
Did you have a client who does like helicopters or something?
Yeah, helicopters. That's a pretty expensive way to get around.
Not something that you see too often.
No, but it'll make somebody stop when they're scrolling, right?
So that's why I saw it.
So we have a helicopter school that we work with, amusement parks. But then we also do, some high volume businesses as well, like liquor stores and things like that. But it's mostly a lot of high ticket price businesses that have a component of education where they can teach the public things about their industry that appeals to a wide audience. Mm-hmm. As far as what I think can work very, very well on social media. So lawyers fit that bill like 100% of the time. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're passionate. They're controversial. And people are going to listen whether they hate them or not.
Right.
And the comment section is full of people that either hate them or love them. And it's great because that's what we want.
Yeah, we kind of laugh, but it's like the comments of everybody, the negative comments, it's like, I view those as great. It's like, thank you for additional organic reach. Cause that's just, all the bad comments that you can get are just going to lead to more organic reach and more people seeing the video.
More fuel to the fire.
And then you get the people arguing in the comments back and forth.
It's great.
And
it's awesome.
And you're just staying out of it. You're just watching the whole
popcorn.
thing.
Yeah.
It's entertaining.
It is. Absolutely. But like you said, it helps push that video further.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, when TikTok first started to really take hold and clients were starting to see some real results on there, it's a pretty toxic place, right? Like there's a lot of trolls on there, and it's
a wild place.
It's a hard thing for some people to get over, is dealing with those negative comments. And if you're a business or an entrepreneur or a creator and you're putting yourself out there, you're going to get people that are there to shit on you. Yeah. Can I curse on the show? Is that okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Like you're going to get people that are going to do that. That's just, it comes with the territory, right? How you deal with it is a whole another story. But once you get over that and realize that's a good thing, and the more you build your audience and the more you build your tribe of people that actually trust you and like you and want to be associated with you, they'll go to bat for you, like you said, and they'll argue on your behalf in the comments. And then the client just sits back and is just like,
It's wild.
Go for it.
I know in the beginning when I really started to do it, you get those couple of negative comments and you're like, I don't know what to respond. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And then, as you do it more and more, you kind of like become a little bit desensitized to it. But it is funny because it's made me realize, at least, you really are not trying to do business with everybody, right? Like everybody always talks about that. Find your niche. You're just trying to do the business with people that believe what you believe and they feel like they're aligned with what you are trying to accomplish, right? And there's no better place to learn that lesson than social media, because nothing, people are so polarized. They get protected because they're typing through a screen and they're not saying it. They would never say it to your face, right? But they'll comment it on your video. They'll say it, in a comment section. And it makes you realize that that's just not your customer, right? But for every one of those people, there's a person who, like you said, is there to defend you and to go to bat for you. And so it's kind of eye-opening, and it's a good way to learn about that face-to-face business. We always say that social media is just like an amplification of, everything, right? So you think about the relationships that you have. You can only talk to so many people a day. You can only sit down with and have a cup of coffee with or talk on the phone with so many people a day. But when you post that piece of content, you're able to reach 10, 15, 20 times the amount of people and connect with them. And not only that, they now feel like, you know what? Yeah, I've never met Joe, but I know Joe because I've seen 50 of his videos, and I kind of get what his personality is and what he's about, because your personality shows through the content you create. Yeah. Right? So it's a very different way to build a relationship. But that's why people want to do business with you, is because they feel like they know you. They feel like they can trust you. They feel like, Joe seems like a good guy.
Right, exactly. And that's the end goal, right? Is as a business, you obviously want to get customers from this. You want to do that, but there's things you have to do before that to get that to happen. I mean, we very rarely will buy from somebody that we see the very first time. It's very rare that actually happens. So social media gives you that opportunity to kind of get in front of people a lot. And really, you're the only person that's limiting how often you get in front of them. And it gives you that opportunity, like you said, instead of being one-to-one, you're one to millions potentially. Yeah. And no, not everybody's your customer. That is a very good realization to have, because you're not going to sell to everybody. And realistically, you don't need to.
You don't need to. You don't want to. That would just, you don't want to work. Think about that, right? If you talk through that process, you've got someone who believes the opposite of everything you believe, right? So, in our business, in real estate, we're advisors. We're advising them on what they should do with either a purchase or a sale of a home, whether they should, what to do in negotiations. If they disagree with you on every single methodology on how to go about that, all you've done is created a pain in the ass for yourself. Yeah. Right? Your life is going to be a nightmare. And now you want to do that with hundreds of other people? It's a terrible business strategy. Yeah. You'll be miserable and burn out and not want to do the business anymore. So it's like, if those people, let them go work with someone whose belief system aligns with what they want to do, and, just enjoy your life a little bit more.
And those are usually the ones that want to spend the least and are going to cost you the most amount of time. And, a fun exercise that I like to do is, anytime a negative comment comes through on anybody, if I happen to catch one, go to their profile, and chances are they're going to have no followers. Very rarely will they have a profile picture, and they will have put 0 videos out into the public. They are the 100. Yelpers, the ones that live to go online just to shit on people.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I've done that before. Because you almost want to just see, like, okay, I'm putting myself out there, right? We're putting ourselves out there. We're talking, you say things, you're having conversations like this. And yeah, sometimes you look back and you're like, I probably would have said that differently, or I would have went about that a little bit differently. And so people see that and they pounce on that. And then it's like, okay, we're putting ourselves out there. We say things, and sometimes you would go back and say it differently, or you may not agree. Like you said, 3 years from now, you may have a completely different opinion on something than you did then. But they're putting nothing out there. They're not on the hook for any sort of, evaluation. No one's going to, hold them, because they're too afraid to. So they go online and they say, oh, let me talk about, Joe and what he's doing, because he's putting himself out there. And secretly, deep down, I think they're jealous, and they wish that they could do it themselves, but they're afraid to.
Yeah, they're usually in a pretty bad place. Like if that's what you're doing, if you're going online and you're saying that to a stranger,
right?
right? This is a stranger that you're dealing with, right? Like,
and a human being. This is a person who's got a mom and a dad or kids, and it's like you're just putting it out there for just a person.
Yeah, and just
that you would probably could sit down and have an enjoyable conversation with.
Sure, I probably wouldn't sit down with that person because it probably wouldn't get pretty, but like,
but after the fact,
maybe. Yeah, I just, again, like our goal in social and putting ourselves out there, you're doing it, I'm doing it, is to ultimately better ourselves, right? Is to better our lifestyle, to do more, to be more successful. And there's going to be a bunch of people that hate you for that. It's just the way it is. I mean, I remember how many people told me I was nuts for leaving the job that I was leaving. And now like I love those people because I'm like, screw you. Like, look at this.
Right.
So you got to, if you're going to put yourself out there on the internet, you're going to take the good with the bad. You have to, you have to, because there will be bad.
100%. And a lot of what we're doing, and it's funny because you said, a lot of it's educational content, right? Yeah. So a lot of what we're doing with our team is trying to kind of change the way people view real estate agents, right? Because, I think there was a list that came out recently that realtors were ranked below used car salesmen in terms of professions that people trusted. So there you go, right? So basically people would rather go and buy a used car and talk to that person, and they trust them more than, and that's like, not to talk poorly about used car salesmen, but like that's usually the industry that people think of as like the shady backdoor tactics, right? Yeah. So what we're trying to do is provide more clarity and kind of openness to how we talk about things, our viewpoints, our processes, so that it's all out there in the open, right? And it's like you either agree or you don't, but at least you know where we stand. And a lot of that means that we're going against kind of your traditional ways of doing business. And obviously that's going to ruffle some feathers and upset some people, but we're trying to be more open and honest and upfront with people. And I think that's how you have to operate, right? That's why long form content is great for more of that kind of authenticity and honesty. And I've always tried to have as much of that as possible. You don't want to be like that, and I'm sure you've seen this with the content with your clients. Like if you're trying to be something you're not, your content's never going to be effective. People can see right through that. It's not 2010 anymore where you could get away with it because social media was so new. Sure. People can see past that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you're trying to be funny and you're just not funny, like it's one of the worst things. Oh God, it's like cringy.
It's corny.
Yeah, it's
corny. It's like bad. You see those videos and you're like, it's like secondhand embarrassment.
I know you're trying, but try something else. Like
just be yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a really dry sense of humor and that's the best thing that you can do. Like just be authentic to who you are. And I think that resonates a lot more with people than trying to be something you're not.
Yeah, and people like you said, they'll read through it pretty quickly now. I mean, we've all gotten very good at being able to kind of feel the real versus the fake, and because the internet is filled with fake people. I mean, we're putting up an invisible wall behind us or between us and them, and they're able to see through it. It's pretty wild.
It's amazing to see the bullshit meter that people have now compared to even just 10 years ago. But another thing I wanted to talk to you about and ask you about is the hot topic right now, AI. Where are you seeing that? Where do you think that ties into marketing? Are you using, tools? I know you mentioned, Joe, you have like some tools that you use for finding out what's trending topics, things like that. Where do you see AI in marketing and what you do over the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, I think like to an extent, copywriters are scared, right? People that just write
understandably
copy for like, I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm looking at AI, and maybe this is like a, rose-colored glasses kind of a thing, but I look at AI as a tool. The same way that you can look at a camera, lighting, microphones, they're tools. If you know how to use them, you're going to be able to create things that are amazing. If you rely on them too much, the bullshit meter is going to come back, and people are going to eventually realize like this is not written by a person.
Right.
I think the tool is only as good as the person that's using it. So for us, do we use AI in what we do? We've really started to. I mean, we've started to do it in a few different things. I mean, I put together a PPC strategy for a client yesterday, and a lot of it came from ChatGPT because it's super powerful and it's going to do it way quicker than I'm going to be able to do it.
And now it's it's learning about you, right? So it
Sure.
knows your voice, and it can kind of start
Yeah.
to mirror, like, okay, this is what I'm trying to, but that's if you know how to use it.
Yeah, you have to, again, it's the tool is only as good as the person using it, right? A hammer in my hands is worthless, but to somebody that has been building houses for 20 years, it's everything, right? So I'm just trying to get really good at using that particular type of hammer. So that way when, it does become way more prominent, we'll be ready. Like we're already using it. I mean, we've used it for video scripts and for idea generation and for, like I said, PPC, caption writing, things like that. You always have to add your own little spin on it and put that human element in it. But ultimately, it's going to make life so much easier if you use it properly. And I love it for that. I mean, it's amazing. There's a few AI tools that we use that are just fantastic.
It's incredible. I mean, and it's crazy to think where it's going to go. This is like the early stages of it, like 3 to 5 years, like what that looks like. I'm sure. I mean, if you even just think, like you mentioned earlier with TikTok, 5 years ago, that wasn't around, right? So it's completely revolutionized the way that things are done, even on the other platforms. So it's crazy to think what AI could potentially lead to within, the tools, but also even within social media and what that looks like in 3 to 5 years. Yeah. If we could figure that out, we'd probably be pretty wealthy.
Absolutely. I'm all for it. I mean, I really am. I mean, are there some dangers to it? Of course there are. Like that's just anything. They said the same thing about the radio when it came out. So it's like, let's be real. But it's in the right hands, it's awesome. In the wrong hands, it could be dangerous.
Right.
It goes with anything. Because same thing can be said for this water bottle, right?
And that's what I've said from day one. You could say the same thing about the internet, right? You can use the internet to amplify your business, or you could go on the black market and do all sorts of bad and sketchy things. Yeah. So it's a tool, and you're absolutely right. It's in the hands of the individual on how they're going to use it.
But I love it. I like my stance on it. Fantastic. For our practices, it's making things faster, right? It's making things faster, sometimes better. That's what we want, right? We want things to be more efficient. We want things to be better. We want to automate things, and we want to make our jobs and our lives easier. So we're not literally writing out 50 and trying to think of 50 different keywords that I have to put into this ad campaign. Whereas this can spit out 25 of them in 5 seconds.
Right. And think of things you would have never thought of.
Exactly. And again, but you got to know how to use it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I kind of want to shift the conversation in a self-serving way and talk about the real estate industry. Because I think it's very evident, at least, and this is my perspective, real estate is a very, what I would call, lagging industry, right? And I know we've talked about this in the past. Like the marketing that's done and the way of doing business is very old school, and people don't really like to adapt. As a third party, someone who's not, a real estate agent, and what's your viewpoint on real estate marketing and what you're viewing in the content that you're seeing online? Like, do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, I do. It's funny because I think about it a little bit like the area of law and law practices in that you've got a lot of real estate companies and like lawyers that have been doing it a certain way for a very long time, and they're not very quick to adapt to the way things are. And I'm seeing a lot of young guys and girls coming out, and those are the ones that are starting to crush it. Those are the ones that are starting to build audiences. Those are the ones that are starting to shake things up, going against what the elders, I guess, like you can say, would want. And I'm all for that. Like, I let the dinosaurs turn into oil. You know what I mean? Like let's go. Like this is the time to, you have this amazing tool in your pocket. Go use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, at least my opinion is that you're at a competitive disadvantage to, everybody that is doing it. And I know that, people always talk about ROI, right? They say, well, what's the ROI of this? What am I getting for my advertising dollars or my, my branding and my marketing dollars, right? And the way I look at it is nowadays, especially real estate, it's so much of it is done online. And so much of it is, what does the consumer know about you? What do they think about you? And so, yes, you may create content, and that may not be the reason that people call you, but it may be the reason they call you in 5 years, right? It may be the reason they think about you in 5 years, and you can't quantify that because real estate it's such a lagging metric in the sense that, so on average, they say it takes about 15 months for the average consumer to decide whether or not they're going to move, right? And then within that time, once they decide, it only takes them 3 days to choose their broker. So what that means is you might meet someone today, and if they don't decide to move for 2 years, if you never speak with them, if you're never in front of them, if you never interface with them, they're never going to use you, right? So I look at organic content and marketing as a way to consistently maintain that relationship, build trust with them. But you can't quantify that today or next week or 6 months from now if they don't call you for 2 years. And it is a big ticket item, right? So it's not like the commissions that are paid are insignificant. So you can justify it, but I think there's so much hesitancy to invest. And they'd much rather go and send out 10,000 postcards. They'd much rather go out and run a radio advertisement, and that's really it. They'd go knock on doors or cold call, right? They would rather cold call 500 people than just build a brand and personality online that's trustworthy, that people want to work with, and play the long game. And that's kind of what drives us crazy, because that's what gives all of us a bad name, right? If you get a call every single week from a different real estate company, you're like, screw these people. All they want to do is call me constantly and try and sell me on themselves, and I don't want to move, right? If I wanted to move, I would be looking for someone, but I'm not. And so that's what drives me crazy. And I just don't think I think the only way that it changes is that the old school way of thinking gets phased out over time. But it's hard because not a lot of people want to do that type of marketing. It's so hard because it is such a long game. Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. And I guess, my question is, for an agent, right? Say you're a brand new agent, you do want to do that. What do you think are the ways that someone can go about building that kind of online presence? And what do you think, what are your, tips for someone like that?
I think after hearing that stat of, somebody deciding in 15 months whether or not they're going to actually move, is you've got a year and a half to convince somebody that if they do decide, you're their person, right? So you have a lot of opportunity to reach out to them along the way, not cold call, or DM or anything like that, which I think is so sleazy, by the way. I agree with you.
I can't stand it.
There's a lot of ways there's a lot of videos you could post in a year and a half, right? There's a lot, right? Yeah. I think just going back to short form video, kind of like what you're doing, you have to understand that it is that long of a game. If you go into it thinking that it's not that long of a game, you're going to stop doing it after a month, or maybe even shorter, because you're not going to get those results that you want. You might get that dream listing, or you might get a couple of listings, you might get a couple of phone calls, whatever that might be, but it might not lead to anything, which you should already be accustomed to as a realtor, because you deal with that on a day-to-day basis anyway. So I don't know why that mentality is so hard to wrap their head around. But knowing that it's a long game, as much content as possible. I mean, I think less of the showings type of content and more of this type of content where you can teach somebody something that they didn't know.
Right.
And not being afraid to say that same thing 50 different ways and 50 different times. Because you never know when that one's going to actually end up hitting, Right. So taking the educational route, so the teaching covers the educational, right? The inspiring element could be just showing high-end homes. I mean, looking at things that people aspire.
The luxury type of lifestyle.
Exactly, aspire to do.
Type stuff.
And then if you can be entertaining in either of those ways, because you're either charismatic, like I know you're very good on camera, like you're very personable, likable, you can be entertaining and accomplish those other two things. So if you're, I don't know why they're not adapting to it, but posting videos every day for a year and a half until that person buys from you.
I could go on a tangent on why I think that is. I mean, my essential belief is that because real estate is a very, it's an older industry, and that's nothing to say about specific age, but I don't think people are taking a 5 to 10 year time horizon on this, right? So you're looking at your business and you're planning and adapting because you plan to be in business, I assume, in 10 years.
Sure. Yeah, right? Exactly.
But if you were going to retire in 3 years, would you care as much?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, absolutely not.
And I think that's why. And I think until that shift happens, you're only going to see. But the reality is, with technology, we're seeing more and more of the people who are willing to do that taking even more and more of the business, right? And I think you hit on a very important point, which was, you do less of the showings, less of the house, because that's making the product the house and not you.
Yep.
And that's really what we're doing. I mean, I'm sure with what you're doing on social, right? Like your content is focused around educational content for entrepreneurs and businesses that showcase not like technical, like this is what you should do. It's like, here's my advice, here's my tips, here's what I'm seeing, but you're the product, right? It's like you want to come and work with Vivo because of Joe. Because Joe is going to help and guide you because he has that special sauce or that secret, you know, he gets it, right? And some people, they just get it, and some people, they just don't.
With real estate, anybody can go on Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com and see the house.
Right. They can look at the pictures.
They can look at the pictures, they can look at the video and see the house. They don't need a realtor to do that. Right? So what you said was 100% correct. They're not buying the house. You're not selling them the house. You have to sell them on you first. Like one of our clients is a liquor store, right? We work with a liquor store. I've worked with them forever. Like we don't need to sell the wine.
They already want it.
We know they want to buy it. We need to get them to buy it here. That's it. And we want them to do that by showing your personality, what you do, what you know, you're entertaining them, you're making them laugh. That's why they're coming to you. Right? They don't need to be sold on Tito's. They're not. Like they don't. They need to be sold on your store. That's what they need to be sold on. So real estate's the same way. The product is you are that product. So as much as you can show that, and it's like I feel like beating a dead horse by saying give as much value as you can, give as much value as you can, but like that's really what it comes down to. If you give somebody a reason to stop scrolling and they stop on you, if you get them for a few seconds and you get them for a few more, then you hit them again with something else. Just you're planting seeds left and right until that 15-month time frame comes along, and they're like, oh, you know, I followed this realtor who's, you know, right in Westchester or wherever you are now, and it's like, that's my guy. Like that's the guy. And they might even come to you. I don't know if you're seeing this. Are you seeing people being like, hey, I want to go look at this house?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had all. It's interesting because the more you do, like we'll post a video tour and we'll have someone be like, I want to go see that specifically. Or we'll post some piece of educational content and we'll have someone in the comments who's like, oh, I would never work with that guy. And then the other guy's like, if this is really what he believes, I love that because that's not what I'm hearing from other people. And then you start a conversation. And then I've even had people who reach out to me who are not the consumer, but their sister is buying a home or their aunt or uncle is buying a home. So like you get that like, oh, you've got to connect with this person, or they just want to learn about it. You know, what we've done as well is we've gotten a lot of content from or outreach from other brokers and other agents who will touch base and kind of, you know, connect. And it's great to build those relationships. I'm very much, my approach to the business is all about relationship building, right? Because if you take a 10 or 15 year time horizon, you have no idea, how do you put a value on a relationship? How do you put a value on a connection, right? You know, so I mean, we've known each other now since like 2014, 2015. Like that, so it's been almost, you know, 10 years of varying different relationships, varying different, conversations and connections. And so it's great to maintain those relationships and just see where it leads. And you never know. And that's what I look at social media as, a great way to connect, continue those relationships, continue those conversations, and see what happens.
And you're starting new relationships every day with everything you post.
Exactly.
You have an opportunity to reach out to somebody brand new that has never seen you before. And you know, you gotta think that every time you post something, you have to make that video for somebody that's never seen you before, right? Because chances are they haven't. And that gives you a lot of opportunities for first impressions with lots of people.
So kind of ending it on this question, right? Where do you see Vivo and the marketing industry going over the next couple of years? What's next for you? What are you planning on? What's like the goals? You know, where do you see things going?
So I see AI taking a really big hold of this and like being used a lot more than it is right now. I see paid media is already, I think it's going to look completely different 5-10 years from now than it even looks right now. You know, for me, I see the team growing. I don't see content getting any smaller. I think it's only going to keep growing, and the need for that is going to keep growing. My goal is how to scale it up bigger than where I am, which is, you know, the goal of any entrepreneur that wants to grow. I have some ideas on how we're getting there, but the goal is just to keep putting out the best product that we can possibly put out. That way more people talk about us. And just keep growing the team to a point where, you know, I don't necessarily want this to be this massive thing. I never necessarily thought that that's what I wanted.
Right.
But, I could see a team of 10 to 15, doing multiple 7 figures, no problem, in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's awesome. Well, I wish you the best of luck, and
Same.
we'll have you back to keep an idea on where things are going and the trends and everything else. So
anytime, man. I love sharing this stuff. I talk about
awesome.
I share it on my socials. So this is what I talk about all day.
So while you mentioned that, where's a great place for people to connect and follow with?
If they want to just connect with me, just Instagram is probably the best. Joe Amato Marketing on Instagram. If you want to check out the company page, you can. It's vivocreative.net. You can go check it out there. But if you want to connect with me, you can shoot me a DM. Right on Instagram is the best place.
Awesome.
Best place.
Well, thanks for coming out, man.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.